Hello everyone, myself is Dinesh and my roll number is 536 and my topic is about modern tools and current trends in web development. The three fundamental technologies of a web which remain as the foundation: hypertext, markup language, uniform resource identifier URI, and hypertext transfer protocol HTTP, followed by many languages such as cascading style sheets CSS, Java hypertext preprocessor, PHP, JavaScript, Python, structured query language, SQL, Angular, and many more were introduced over the years to implement web technology, keeping in mind both web security issues and the ease to programmers in the programming language. Today, for any web application, the three building block coding languages required are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Monolithic application means is that the application has its authentication, posts, profiles, database, and servers all in one place. In the case of a microservice application, its post section is separately a different application. Similarly, the authentication is under application and the profile. An application with monolithic architecture is dependent on all its part of its one of the sections. For example, the authentication system of that application failed due to some error, the application would be disrupted. If one of the application in microservice fails, it wouldn't affect the other applications within the application. As in the previous example, if the application has an error, then all other routes leaving the authentication routes can be accessed, which is in contrast to a monolithic architecture because all these authentication, posts, and profile services reside in their server, and connectivity is provided to all these services through an event bus. It's a common pipeline of the data to all the services. For example, if a user is authenticated, the authentication services gives this information to the event bus, and from here all the other application receives this update, and accordingly the services provides protected routes. The advantage of using a microservice is the scalability, and its improvements apply to its service rather than the entire application, as in the case of monolithic architecture. The advantage of using a microservice is the scalability and improvements applied to its service rather than the entire application, as in the case of a monolithic architecture. A microservice architecture is achieved through Kubernetes. For example, however, when keeping the time frame in mind, a monolithic architecture could be built faster than microservice architecture, and also due to number of people involved in handling the database in the initial stage would be less. A microservice application becomes tedious in this case. MongoDB or non-SQL JSON type data as a database. For any application today, it must be accessible to its users as quickly as possible. From the business point of view, one requires to scale the application to reach more customers. So there is a need for database that could handle multiple users, millions of users. The traditional relation database managed system RDBMS, which uses structured query language SQL, has its limitations when it comes to handling huge volumes of data. The time complexity involved in pre-processing data in SQL is significantly high as the number of customers increase. MySQL uses an RDBMS type database management system, and MongoDB is a NoSQL data management system. Mongoose. A MongoDB collection is queried by Object Data Mapper ODM. A ODM is a object associated with non-SQL database. And one of the features of a ODM is that it assigns a unique object ID to all its data and in MongoDB database. Hence, these object IDs could be used later to fetch all the data stored with respect to the particular ID. For the purpose of querying the MongoDB database, an ODM library called Mongoose is used in both MongoDB and Node.js. It manages data relationships, provides schema validations, and is used in MongoDB to translate between objects in code and to represent those objects. A Mongoose model function must have a name and a schema that enforces the type of data that can be referred to be accessed and manipulated. The data structure is defined for a model by the Mongoose scheme. The model feature provides an interface for interacting with document information stored at MongoDB. Node.js. Node.js Node is a server-side JavaScript environment. Node.js is an asynchronous I/O eventing model. A single thread is used to handle multiple requests. All the requests are accessed, and the longest request is executed last. Behind the scene, the longest request is running in the background, while the other requests are executed and have been served at the same time using the async and await keywords. A performance analysis is made on Node and compared with the Internet Information Services IIS server. According to results they achieved, Node is most preferable for an IO extensive application. React.js. The two popular JavaScript frameworks used for front-end development at present are React and Angular. Angular is maintained by Google community and React is developed by Facebook. Both are open source frameworks and this help the developers in making single page applications. YouTube, PayPal, Walmart, and Gmail use Angular, and React is used in Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Angular uses real document object model DOM, whereas React uses virtual DOM. A virtual DOM is lightweight and faster than real DOM. Since in a real DOM, a small change in the status of the DOM would cause a re-rendering of the entire DOM in Angular, and this is not the case in React. A virtual DOM, on contrary, only re-renders that certain block or component that has been updated, which makes React much faster than Angular in DOM rendering applications. One more advantage in React is that, unlike Angular, which uses a two-way data binding, React uses a one-way data binding using the store where all the data to be rendered to be front end is created and there is an action and event dispatcher. Details of which would be explained in the next section. One way data flow or binding gives a better understanding and control over the data. REST API. Three routes for creation. Post requests, one for user, second for profiles, and third for posts were created. One route is created. One route is created to authenticate the user, so that a user could enter their email and password, and then they could give a post request to create and delete a post or profile. The profile and routes also had a GET request to read the data of other users' posts and profiles. And JSON Web Tokens (JWT) were used to authenticate the users while logging in. Only authenticated users could access the routes. Postman API was used to check the working of REST API. When a user is logged in, a JWT is created for that user. Now, using this JWT, they could access all the protected routes. And in this figure, we can see that valid JWT and response from the backend and database. Frontend. A frontend of a web app is a web design and the client-side rendering of web content. This includes the CSS, which is the UI part, and React.js, which involves rendering the content. So the goal here is to render the data at node model server, backend server to the node server or client server so that the users could view posts, comments, and profiles in real time. To achieve that, both the servers are to be activated simultaneously, and a npm package concurrently was deployed so that we don't have to run Dormon and client server separately. Instead, with a single command, both of them would be activated. Now to the backend, while requesting Axios, you could make a proxy HTTP localhost port, so that you could make an Axios dot get or post or delete method directly to our backend routes. Axios is a client-side HTTP service within React and Angular. It is used to connect the front-end requests to backend UI or UX design. For any web application, its interface and design play an important role in business because it directly reflects an customer's usage. Keeping this in mind, it's hard to straight away start designing the UI without having a feel of how our application would look like to our customers. This is where a need for UX arises. The most popular tool for UX or UI designing in Adobe is Adobe XD. Instead of using CSS, the trend now is SASS. SASS is a pre-processed scripting language that is compiled into CSS. So ultimately, the code written in SASS is converted to CSS file. SASS provides flexibility to CSS. We could declare multiple variables for colors once and use them throughout the design. Redux. Redux is an open source JavaScript library that handles the status or commonly called a state of application. It is widely used to create the user interface like library with libraries like React or Angular. With Redux, one could connect all their front-end components. A state in Redux is a last term, also known as state tree, but it generally refers to a single state value in Redux API that is controlled by a store and returned by getState function. It reflects the entire state of Redux program. What this means is that any change in any of the components of our application will result from a change in the entire application's rendering. Middleware in Redux offers a medium to dispatch an action before it reaches the edge user. Conclusion. Many web technologies are being made to ease the connection between a retailer and customers across the globe. The most booming tech at present in web tech is MongoDB database, Node.js, and React.js. MongoDB, being a non-relational database management system, is the preferred database at present due to its capability to handle huge volumes of data, which a traditional RDBMS system like MySQL fails. MongoDB uses JavaScript object notation JSON data format to store data into its database. In JSON format, data is stored in key value pairs. So unlike MySQL, where data is to be stored in a table, JSON data is much easier to handle. In case of making a schema to reference between data and MongoDB database, like that of MySQL relating between tables data, Mongoose is used to make a schema and provides the connection between the backend of the application with MongoDB database. And the backend of an application is built using Node.js. React.js is used for client-side rendering of website as an frontend. In case of React, it uses a virtual DM which only re-renders the particular component that is been updated rather than re-rendering the entire content on the DOM as in the case of Angular. That's it. Thank you, everyone.